My paternal grandfather, Ardaşes Najarian, was born in 1904 in Diyarbakır, Turkey. His father, Arakel, was a carpenter, as indicated by the Najarian last name. I'm proud to say that my great-grandfather, Arakel, helped place the bell into St. Giragos Church's 30-meter-high bell tower. This church included a bell tower, I just mentioned, would later be deliberately destroyed by Turkish-German cannon fire in 1915. At the onset of the genocide, all Armenians were being deported and killed, including my great-grandfather's two brothers and mother. So what saved his family? Once the genocidal campaign started, it became apparent that there would be a shortage of skilled tradesmen. Business, not compassion, was the reason for their survival. My paternal grandmother, Lusanush, was born in 1912 in Yozgat, Turkey. She, along with her sister, Yeranush, would end up in an orphanage, following the extreme hardships of deportations exacted on their mother, Makruhi. The following is from my grand aunt's memoir. Chetans, a gang of criminals, arrive in Yozgat. They demand the key for the church from Der Stepan, my great-grandfather. Der Stepan gets the key and is then beaten. All of the men are then rounded up from places of work and their homes and are held inside the church. Der Stepan informs the bell ringer that the back wall of the church has a few loose stones that could be moved to give an escape route for the young. The Armenian bell ringer informs the captors of this plan. Der Stepan informs the bell ringer that the back wall of the church has a few loose stones that could be moved to give an escape route for the young. The Armenian bell ringer informs his captors of the plan. Der Stepan's hands are bound, and then he's tied to a horse-drawn cart. He is then dragged along as his unprotected head bounces over the ground. Later, he would be speared by a Chetan to make sure that he was dead. Then the Chetans set their sights on the informer, the Armenian bell ringer. The Chetan leader says, "He who betrays his own very easily can turn on us." The bell ringer is killed by 3 Chetans. My great-granduncle, Bartholomeus, makes a final plea to the Chetan leader. "Take all my possessions and set us free." The Chetan leader responds, "Effendi, if I set you free, then my entire family will be killed by my leaders. Any final requests?" "Cigarettes for each person." They all have one final smoke, except for 2 men. Those men were in fact girls who were accidentally rounded up from the fields. These 2 girls recount this story to Mari Gostanyan, my great-grand-aunt's daughter, who was born in 1904. My paternal grandfather, Hraj Penjoyan, was born in 1906 in Erzurum, Turkey. When the genocidal campaign began, the men were separated from the rest. My grandfather's father, Setrag, requested to kiss goodbye his children, but he is beheaded in front of his son, my grandfather, Hraj. Prior to the roundup, Hraj's 2 eldest sisters both threw themselves into the river, preferring drowning over the capture by the enemy. Hraj would eventually get separated from his family and end up in Hajan with his sister's family. The Armenians of Hajan would later seek refuge in the hills. This fragmented history is recounted by my mother. She goes on to recall how my grand-aunt's family gets on a train that later gets bombed. My grandfather, Hraj, who got separated at this time, would go on to be sheltered in a Kurdish village, then to Aleppo, Syria, on foot. Once in Aleppo, he would be helped by a non-Armenian who was the owner of a beverage shop where he drank and drank after his long and difficult journey. By some miracle, my grandfather Hraj would find his mother, Gayane. He would go on to sell water, shine shoes, and later on, when he found his mother, he would sell bishi, some type of fried dough with sugar. That his mother would make. One day, after he came back from his work, he would find his mother passed away. Later, another relative would find Herach and reunite him with other surviving members in Mosul, Iraq. My maternal grandmother, Hayastan Eliza der Harutyunyan's story begins with her mother, Herine, who was born in Erzurum, Turkey. In 2003, I met my great-grandmother Herine's sister, Manush, in Yerevan, Armenia. The following is from her memoir. One day, all of our lives changed. Armenians were rounded up and held overnight in a barn. The following morning, we were stripped of all of our belongings. Then our captors started to kill and maim the Armenian men using axes and other blunt instruments. I, Manushag, would be witness to the killing of my father and several other men. Then they started to take away the pretty girls, leaving the rest, including children, untouched. Those untouched were to march through deserts to their death. Manushag goes on to say, we eventually reached Kharpert. It is at this point the story takes an unexpected turn. A name is called out. An Assyrian woman who was in the group being deported is suddenly set free. She turns to her captors and says, these girls are mine too. This Assyrian woman, whose name I do not know, saves the lives of my great-great-grandparents' children. Herine, my grandmother, who was saved by that Assyrian woman, would go on to marry Hapet der Vartanyan. They would go on to have 3 children, Hayastan Eliza, my grandmother, Kevork, and Levon. Hayastan, later named Eliza, would go on to marry Herach Penjoyan, my grandfather, in Mosul, Iraq. Eliza would pass away at a young age. She would never see her grandchildren, my sister, or myself. My second maternal grandmother, Marianush Bengoyan, was born in 1916 in Antep, Turkey. As a result of the genocide, she would become an orphan and would grow up in an orphanage in Lebanon. At the age of 13, the Kırkcan family would take her into their home. At the age of 46, she married my grandfather, Herach. My maternal grandmother, Eliza, had passed away 3 years earlier. This orphaned baby from the genocide would go on to be a sweet, loving grandmother. In fact, she's the only grandparent that I recall. The only one that saw my sister and I grow up from newborn to adulthood. She was present at my sister's marriage, and she met my